Hello and welcome to the Safri Business Talks podcast. I'm Jamie Lane. I'm a partner at accountancy firm Safri, and I work with a variety of owner-managed businesses across a range of sectors. Join us each episode for in-depth discussions on the topical issues impacting businesses and their owners. We're here to help guide you through these areas and to provide practical tips for you to consider. And don't forget, please, to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic that sits at the core of many professional services firms, but is often complex and evolving, and that is partnership life. What does it really mean now to be a partner in today's world? How has the role changed, and what are the expectations, challenges, and also opportunities that come with it? So, to help us explore this, I'm joined by Andrew Hedley, Director of Hedley Consulting. And Andrew works closely with leadership teams across the legal, accounting, and property sectors, advising on everything from strategy and growth to performance and change management. His experience gives him a unique lens on what it takes to succeed in partnerships today. So, Andrew, thanks for joining. Let's start with the big picture. When we talk about partnership life, what does it actually mean today, professional landscape?
Hi, Jamie. Yeah, really pleased to be here. And it's a great question, isn't it? Because I think firms have changed so much. Professional partnerships have changed so much. The professional sectors have changed so much over the last 15, 20 years. So, there was a very simple definition of a partner 20 years ago, generally, which was an owner, equity partner who had a financial stake in the business. That's moved dramatically over the years. And I guess we saw shifts to a salaried partner cohort. We've seen prior share or fixed share partners appear into the mix. So it really depends upon the nature of the firm. I think if you've got an observation, I would say the smaller firm or the more traditional firm still tends to be structured in a traditional equity partnership, sometimes whole equity, sometimes with a fixed share or a salary partner layer. We've got a lot of firms now, of course, which are not even partnerships in any sense of the word. They're private equity owned. They've got external capital. They're ABS structures in terms of the legal sector, and people there wear the badge of partner. So I think really, if you boil it back, what it really means, I think, fundamentally in a modern firm is you're a senior leader. You're sometimes an owner. You set the tone. You set the culture. You're there really, to drive the business forward, to ensure it's sustainable, and to build an environment in which all the people in the business can succeed. So it's very, very different to how it was 20 years ago. But I think fundamentally the ethos is still the same for any partner, for any leader in a business.
And do you think over that period, the aspirations of people to come to partner have probably changed?
It's a really interesting question because certainly if I talk to many firms, they'll say, it's not like it used to be. People would join a partnership organization and their aspiration would be to become a partner. That was their key driver. Society's changed, the world's changed, demographics have changed. And certainly, we've got people who are extremely good technicians, extremely good people who don't want the responsibilities that come with being a partner. And at the same time, there are people who actually definitely do want that as well. I think perhaps what's changed in terms of the way in which that is talked about is the fact it's talked about. Whereas perhaps people would feel if I say I don't want to be a partner, that will somehow mean I'll be out of the door very quickly. I think firms are much more mature now in recognizing there's a resource here to manage, some of whom will become future owners, future partners. Others will be extremely good people, doing the work that needs to be done. I don't think it's changed quite so much as people perhaps fear. And of course, we always look back, I think, in history generally, the older generation looks upon the younger generation as sort of, not quite as hardworking, not quite as focused, not quite as ambitious as they once were. We could talk to our parents, they would say the same about us. We may say the same about the people who are the next generation down. So I think that's more of a human nature thing. But apparently exams were really, really hard 50 years ago and they're dead easy now. So it's just amazing that the human race keeps advancing.
It is. It is.
Absolutely.
But I suppose, though, if you are on the outside of partnership and it's something that you're aspiring to become a partner, is it fair to say, do you think, in most industries that you deal with, that the partner badge, it's a journey in itself? So it's not you're going from, if I think of an accountancy business, you go from director to partner, and they are quite, I suppose, binary in terms of you're one or the other. But actually, I always think now you're kind of at the bottom of the next rung.
That's a really good word, actually, Jamie. Journey, because it is a journey, absolutely. And I think actually that journey starts with the trainee. And actually, if it's about succession, I think people often talk about succession as being the bit that happens before someone retires. Whereas I think succession actually starts with the trainees. And if you're sitting there in a business and you look over your shoulder and you can't see, I don't know, the 5, 6, 7 year qualified people who are potentially future partners, that's a problem that you need to address. And you can address it one of two ways. You can make them. You can create great development opportunities and develop people you've got, or you can buy them. I bring people in who've got those skills. So I think, and yeah, as you say, once you're promoted to be a partner, regardless of the structure, as a newbie, you've got a huge amount to learn. And I think one of the things which I'm often quite interested in is that when you talk to potential new partners about what it means to be a partner, often they don't really know. They don't understand what it means to be an owner. They don't understand what it means to put capital into a business. They don't understand that the responsibility is a lot more than just being a great technician. It extends to investment decisions. It extends to people management. It extends to all sorts of stuff, which is about running a business, which perhaps you're not necessarily exposed to as a practitioner on the desk. Let's also be fair. I think there are also firms, many firms, where you have people who wear the badge of partner, who are de facto very good, very experienced, very highly paid technicians, and that's all they do. And there's a place for those people. But perhaps what I see in partnerships, how they're developed, is those people do reach a glass ceiling within the partnership. And to go beyond that glass ceiling, you need to be putting something else in, something more in. You need to be developing, winning clients, developing the business, leading teams, none of which really are at the core skill that you thought when you entered the profession.
Yeah.
Most people didn't enter a profession to do those things. They entered the profession to do the core skill. So again, within the partnership, there's different shades of partners, different roles, different responsibilities. I guess a change I've seen over the last probably 10 years, maybe longer, is a recognition that not all partners are equal in the sense of their contribution, and neither should they be. We need to play to strengths. We need to play to the strengths of individuals, but also recognise that when we play to strengths, certain abilities have got an inherently greater value than other abilities. So it starts to can create a lot of tension, or it can create a lot of opportunity. It can create an environment in which someone who thinks, "Oh my gosh, I can't do this. How will I do it?" can say, "Actually, I don't need to do it. I can do what I'm good at." And yes, it will mean some of those other things never come to me, but that's fine. We'll balance view now.
And I think the fact that if you take the partnership model and the fact that you might have salaried partners, fixed share partners, equity partners, then equity partners that are on different sort of levels of equity within the business, sometimes that's quite frowned upon from the people coming through the business. And there's a perception that not everybody's equal, but actually,
Yeah.
the point you make is that there are lots of different parts of partner life that you either get used to and learn on the job effectively, and that's how you can move through that, or you naturally settle at a, I don't know, salary partner level, fixed share partner level, and you might not move through that.
I think that's true. I think that's true, Jamie. And I guess it's when I'm working, I talk a lot about this thing called the growth mindset, and that's about basically being prepared to challenge yourself, being prepared to fail, but always wanting to learn and wanting to improve. And if someone is ambitious and is prepared to do those hard yards, you can improve. But let's be clear: all partners are not equal any more than all people are equal. We've all got different strengths and capabilities. And I think recognizing that, and if you want to develop into something different, be prepared to do the hard work that's required. And a lot of the hard work actually is not physical hard work. It's not hours. It's actually in your head. It's changing your mindset, which is the difficult bit, much more so than a new skill, going to a class or attending a conference.
And what do you see, when you're talking to senior leaders in partnerships, what do you see them citing as the key challenges that newer partners coming into their partnership have?
Mentioned already, understanding what it means to be a partner. And again, I think firms now are much better at being clear about what the expectations are, often on a sort of balanced scorecard. So, of which, being technically able clearly is one of the things, but actually it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And it's things like, how do you lead and motivate and manage a team? How do you develop existing clients to the full? How do you win brand new clients? And actually, in some respects, how do you make sure that you're only doing the really important work, the really difficult work that only you can do? And I guess a danger in a traditional partnership is the partner has to be the busiest person on the team, busyness being defined by billing the most fees. And now to me, in my simple world, it makes no sense at all to have a highly experienced partner doing work that could be done by somebody who's 5 years qualified, who sat next to the experienced partner with not enough work on their desk. So again, I know firms which operate a sort of a team targets approach, where actually if the partner's too busy and the team aren't busy, that's not a good thing. That's the sort of thing which is frowned upon, because actually we all know in any transaction, piece of work, matter, there's levels of complexity which allow the work to be done at different levels within the structure of the business. That's good for the client in terms of the costs, but it's also good for the people because they get experience. Everyone working at the top of their ability, I think, is where we should be aiming for in many respects.
Yeah, I suppose that's the operational leverage point, and I always talk about this with clients where you just said it effectively, that you got the lowest person in the ranking of the team effectively to doing the highest level of work that they're capable of doing. And this leads me on nicely in terms of the tensions that can arise in partnership, that perhaps if you're listening to this and you're working in a corporate, you would be perhaps quite surprised to hear. But, professional practices and a partnership, there are some pretty unique tensions that arise, aren't there?
There are. It's a unique structure. It's a structure which, arose, many, many years ago, was certainly fit for purpose at the time. But of course, it's a structure which sort of, arguably recognizes or relates to a world which is now past. It relates to a world, where the power balance between the professional and the client was very different. It relates to a world, where the financial opportunity, if you like, of partnership was much more reliable than perhaps it is nowadays. So whilst you may have worked extremely hard for many years to become a partner, once you became a partner, you had a pretty high level of comfort and security that you might not have the richest of Croesus, but certainly you'd enjoy a good standard of living for your career. Very little certainty now in business, full stop, and that includes partnerships. And of course, what we've seen the move from traditional partnerships to LLPs, to limited companies, ABS structures. We've now got external capital coming in, whether that be private equity, whether it be, sort of family office type funds. We've seen professional firms floating. So within those sorts of structures, people are called partners, but they're much, much more sort of worker shareholders. And I guess their involvement in decision making is very, very different to a smaller partnership, where partners often have an expectation to be involved in every decision, including, is it bourbon creams or custard creams, so at a level which really they shouldn't be involved in. And often as businesses grow, that becomes quite a difficult transition as you move the management of the business and the ownership of the business start to separate. So the business is run and managed on a day-to-day basis by a management team, which might include partners, but often will include other professionals, from other disciplines, HR, finance, BD and marketing, IT, of course, knowledge management, learning development. And the partners have a say, of course they do, for the big decisions, but the general run of the business is handled by the management team. And if a business comes through that transition, that can be quite difficult for the guys who are used to being involved in every single decision made throughout the business. But it's necessary, otherwise you become completely sort of stuck in the mud.
Yeah, from a decision-making process perspective, effectively.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think going back to, I want to say like generational viewpoints on, people wanting to come through partnership and whether or not that's changed. I suppose I've always thought, maybe that's a negative for people wanting to come into partnership, that actually, professional services is becoming perhaps what I'd call more corporatized. But actually, if we come into a point where people perhaps don't want to be partners the same way that they would have 10, 20 years ago, then perhaps it plays to a strength there that, people don't have to be involved in running the practice. They can carry on doing what they're good at.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my sister-in-law was for many, many years an in-house, she's retired now, but many, many years in-house lawyer. Loved being an in-house lawyer. Didn't enjoy being in private practice. Yeah. She actually really enjoyed the corporate model, the share options, the certainty, the fact that decisions are made in a much more structured way. And I think probably one of the things which is interesting about a partnership model is there's the culture that drives it. There was a guy called Charles Handy, who's a really, really good management author. He passed away just last year, I think. Wrote lots and lots of books, very years and years ahead of his time. He wrote a book called The Gods of Management, and he basically took four Greek gods and used them as archetypes of different types of structures, different types of organizations. Whether they be high organizations which are run by a powerful person at the top, which are called the Zeus organizations, organizations which are bureaucracies, but there's a type of organization he called the Dionysian organization. So Dionysius was the Greek god of pleasure. Classically, professional service organizations fall into that category. And the difference between the Dionysian organization and the other three is that in the other three organizational types, the people exist to serve the organization, whereas in the Dionysian organization exists to serve the people. So what you see in professional partnerships are organizations which are there really to provide an environment in which the professionals can work. Huge levels of autonomy, huge levels of the ability to do things their way, which is difficult to transfer into, say, a manufacturing business where things are done in a certain way for very, very good reasons in terms of quality control, et cetera, et cetera. We've got an organization where the whole culture is about individuality, autonomy, to a degree optionality in terms of what I choose to do and what I choose not to do. And that includes often optionality in terms of whether I choose to do what management asks me to do or not. Yeah. So the cultural piece is really important in that. But of course, once you move into a more corporate structure, optionality starts to reduce, autonomy starts to reduce. We have a certain way of doing things around here. This is what we expect from you. So I guess depending on how much autonomy is crucial to you will depend upon the sort of partnership you want to be part of. There's very, very large partnerships, whatever their structure, whether they be limited partnerships, LLPs, limited companies, private equity investments, in all those organizations above a certain size, partners are in that worker shareholder category. They are going to have to fit to a degree with how the business wants to run. But culturally, they're much more like, I'd like to be in my own office, doing my own thing, in my own way, in my own time. So there's a tension, there's a cultural tension there.
Yeah, and where, if I look at accounting, law, it probably goes wider than those two professions. But the big thing at the moment is change around AI and working practices that probably haven't changed that much over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And that partnership model has worked quite well in that situation. However, what you were just saying then in terms of where partners all want to have a say, the constitutions can often be set up or the fact that all the partners have to have a say. It means that if you've got to change a rate that is far, far exceeding how you've changed in the last 20, 30, 40 years, it really gives you a competitive disadvantage. And actually, it's kind of like a burning platform almost. What are you seeing there in the sector in terms of how firms are trying to deal with that?
You're absolutely right. It is a burning platform. And I guess, you look at the sort of all the theory around change, and that's the first thing you need. You need a reason to change because, as humans, we like to find our place of comfort. So when you're a human working in an organization where you've had lots of autonomy, you'll be able to find your place of comfort. So why would you change? And the psychology is fairly clear that people will only really consider change when they believe pain of change will be less than the pain of staying where you are. So that burning platform, and I mean, the sense of urgency is the sort of the term that's used, which is often a burning platform. It needn't be a burning platform, but it can be a sense of urgency about opportunity. There's a window here. If we move quickly, we can grasp opportunity. But most change is about burning platforms, if I'm honest with you. And we had a great example, didn't we? Five years ago, we had a great example of organizations that could not change. It was impossible. They can't do it. Changed overnight when COVID hit. Suddenly, people who had to sit in their own office every day, be served tea at 11 o'clock. The hobnob, chocolate obviously, would be better. Suddenly we're working from home, on Zoom. So we've absolutely demonstrated that when we need to change, we can change. The question is, as leaders, how do we get people into that mindset? Into a mindset, where change is viewed as something, as an opportunity, something to be embraced, not as something to be sort of feared and resisted. Because the one thing I do know is that if you can't change your organization, then you're really at the whim of the market. The market will decide your fate.
Yeah.
If you can change your organization, you can adapt and evolve and move with the market. One of the things I guess I'd say as well about professional partnerships in the traditional sense is, they are fairly fragmented. So look at the professions you've mentioned, law and accountancy. I mean, there are 10,000 law firms in the UK, believe it or not, of which I think it's about 9 now. But but there's about 9,000 law firms in the UK, of which about 6,000 are sole practitioner or two-partner partnerships. You look at the top of that market. You've got huge corporates turning over billions of pounds, but a phenomenally long, fragmented tail. So in that sense, the market consolidation. The accounting market is more consolidated, but it's still got a very, very long tail. The forces out there for change are not what they are in highly consolidated markets. There are certain markets where, a law firm or accounting firm has de facto, a dominant position in a local market. And unless there's a new entrant, why would they change?
Yeah.
And that's dangerous thinking, really dangerous thinking. But I think that's where a lot of firms are. Why should we change? I'm 5 years from retirement type of thinking.
Yeah. And that's probably the problems, isn't it? In terms of when you look at the spectrum of people in the partnership, you've always got this tension between the partners that have just bought in and the partners that want to exit.
100%. And of course, the ones who want to exit, come from a place where that exit has been sort of guaranteed. The ones who are coming in are, perhaps don't have access to capital in the way that people had in the past. There's certainly an era when I talked to some, perhaps not now because they've all retired, but some solicitors 20 years ago where the bank manager wouldn't dare ask them, about their financial position. That was completely unacceptable. And that's very different nowadays. Again, so the certainty has gone, I think, in the profession. But yeah, the people coming through, if they're going to be putting capital into a business, they want to look at the business through objective commercial eyes. Where is it? What are its markets? How sustainable are its markets? Where are the competitive threats from existing firms just like us? Where are the competitive threats coming from new entrants? What about disruptors? What about AI you've mentioned, Jamie? What about AI? How will that market disrupt? Where do we get the capital to invest in the technology? So if they're going there with their eyes open, they'll be asking some quite telling questions before they choose to make an investment. And let's be clear, this is an investment which is unlike most investments. Most investments, you put money into a stock market. If you lose the money or the money drops, that's completely separate from your day job, if you like.
Yeah.
These two things are completely combined. This is your life. So I think I'm seeing, I guess if I'm being unkind, perhaps, I guess I see two types of people perhaps into partnerships. One type who are very commercial and who want to know these things, and one who actually just want to be, almost want to believe it's all going to be okay because it's always been okay up to now. So I'd encourage those people to think hard and get some advice before they take that leap.
And capital is probably the sort of word of the moment in various professional services sectors. Law and accounting, as we've talked about in particular, law, we've probably seen a lot more listing activity and now private equity. Accounting, lots of private equity activity, and now we have a listed accountancy firm. That is almost forcing change on the sector, I think. What do you see when you're speaking to people, senior leaders in these firms?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's again, professional practices have traditionally been quite low capital intensity, but even until quite recently, all you needed really was a laptop and an office and a printer. You could set up as an accountant or as a lawyer. I'm an architect by profession. Again, all you needed was a very, very low capital intensity as a barrier to entry. I think what we're seeing now is businesses which are much more capital intensive, and especially in terms of technology investment. I think there's a realization of that. So the question is, where does the capital come from? And, in my simple world, there's a limited number of places it can come from. It can come from the partners, i.e. the partners put the capital in. It can come from effectively reallocation of profit, and it can come from borrowing it. And you can borrow from a bank, or you can borrow it by giving an equity stake in your business, and you start to run out of options quite quickly. And I think there's a cadre of firms who are at the point where, because of the size they are and their capital needs are as they are, they're facing some quite difficult decisions about how to manage that. At the other end of the spectrum, at the low end of the spectrum, those pressures don't exist. With the very, very large firms, they have the critical mass to make those investment decisions more easily, because the leverage of the investment is across far greater people and far greater sort of productive capacity. But yeah, I think that's driving a lot of thinking at the moment. How do we invest in top tier people who cost money? If we're going to go into a lateral hiring policy, the evidence is pretty clear that a lot of laterals don't succeed to the extent that is anticipated. So how can we be better at identifying the characteristics of the people we bring into the business as lateral hires and their ability to convert their potential into reality? That could be expensive because there's also a time lag between the person arriving and the person becoming productive. So if we're going to be expanding, we all know growth costs money, growth costs cash. We need to invest in infrastructure at an ever increasing pace. Infrastructure itself is changing rapidly and needing to be refreshed rapidly, which is putting more cash burdens. And of course, we're in a ferociously competitive job market where people, whether they be the lawyer, accountant, architect, or whether they be the people who support them, are expensive. So you've got in many firms, you've got a revenue line and a cost line, and the cost line is running hotter than the revenue line. And that's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah.
That's caused all sorts of partnership restructurings. Effectively the cake isn't growing, but we need to keep the slices growing, so we'll have fewer slices of the cake. So partnerships get often for those sorts of reasons to recognise the super performers versus the really good people, but not quite super performers, versus the people who are just really good at their technical job. So there's it's much, much more a business now than we're all in together and we're all equal. There's a recognition that's sustainable, I think.
So I suppose my final question, bearing in mind all of that landscape change, which might be quite daunting for someone wanting to come through to partnership. I mean, what would your advice be to someone at that stage in their career?
I think I probably could give some really positive advice, which is it could be a great opportunity. Explore it. Could be a great opportunity. Grasp it, enjoy it, but it's also a big responsibility as well, both to yourself and your family, but also the people who are working with you. Let's be clear. The success of any partnership, by which I mean all the people who work in the partnership, sit with the partners, and that's a big responsibility. I think people we're thinking of partnership, need to be prepared to invest in themselves, and it's a brave new world. You need to engage with it, and I think you need to be prepared to learn the things you don't know because they sit outside your strict technical expertise. And again, what I see firms doing more and more now is what you might call partnership development programs, partner tracks, future leader programs, call it what you will. What that's really doing is saying, let's look at the people who we think might be our future partners, our future senior people, and let's start to broaden their experience, broaden their knowledge, broaden their expertise. So when they come to that choice, they're making a choice with open eyes. On that basis, I'd also say, don't make assumptions about what partnership means in the organisation you're in, because it does vary from organisation to organisation. So, what none of us want is a nasty surprise. Yeah. So, I'll be asking lots of questions and getting sort of, clarity all the way through. Up for both sides. Actually, it may be that your expectations, when you understand it fully, aren't quite what the firm expects. So it's good that both sides understand that. That could end up being difficult in either direction.
Well, Andrew, that brings us to the end of today's conversation. So thank you very much for sharing all those valuable insights. I think if you are a partner in a firm at the moment, or you're thinking about going into a partnership, there's so much to take away from that conversation in what is definitely a landscape that's evolving, changing very, very quickly. So yeah, thank you very much. So that's all for this episode of the Safri Business Talks podcast. At Safri, we provide a range of tax and advisory services to help businesses and their owners achieve their objectives. And if you'd like to find out more about the services we offer, or for more information and insights, then please do visit our website at safri.com. And as ever, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform, and also leave us a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.